So we're going to have a look at yet another tab along the bottom of the home screen, and that's the mixer. And we're going to have a brief look at the mixer here, because this is quite an in-depth subject, so I'll probably break it down into some smaller videos. When you press the mixer tab, by default you are confronted with, let's call it the condensed mixer. So it doesn't take up the whole screen. I can still see the player information at the top, and basically we have volume controls for each of the sections. Now the important bit is this little tab down here that at the moment says pads and keyboard. So that's the keyboard parts, upper 1, upper 2, upper 3, lower, and obviously the pads. So we've got pad 1, 2, 3 and 4. Now we have volume controls, and basically if we just tap on the volume control, that will highlight the orange box around the actual current setting. And then I use the data wheel. You can actually put your finger on. My fingers don't respond as well to screens as some other people, so I tend to use the data wheel. I find I can get a much more accurate setting doing it that way. We can see the name of the sound that's currently selected. Below that we've got a left and a right fader, and that's for panning. So if it says C00, it's dead center. If it says R plus 06, it's to the right 6 steps. And we've got a L minus 20 here, so that's over to the left by 20 steps. A lot of people say, oh, I can't be bothered with all that, but you know, it's not difficult to do, and you can create some really nice effects. Just think of sitting in an auditorium watching an orchestra. Strings, as you look at the stage, strings will be on the left, and the horn section and the brass section will be over on the right. So you could actually recreate that yourself if you've got that mixture of your strings and the horns. Then pan the strings to the left, pan the horns to the right. It's a nice little touch that adds that bit of extra realism. To alter the pan, again, just touch the actual control itself. You'll see the highlight come up in orange, and then again I just use the data wheel to move it as much or as little to the left and right, or leave something dead center. Something like drums and bass, probably gonna want to be dead center. There's no reason why you would have your drums off to one side. The drum is normally in the middle of the mix. So experiment, use it. Below that we've got 2 buttons relative to each slider, M and S, mute or solo. So if you suddenly want to mute a part, you can do that. Now if I was to switch, say, upper 2 off here, you'll notice the mute comes on there. So as with other functions, the buttons work in tandem with the screen. If you were, for instance, as we're going to in a minute, you're going to try and mix the style, there may be a time when you just want to solo one part so you can hear exactly what that part's doing clearly. So how do we see the style information? Well, we started to talk about it. It's this little grey square down the bottom. It says pads and keyboards, and we've explained what that is. If we touch that, it now changes to saying style, and we can now see the volumes, the pan, the name of the sound, the mute and the solo for every single part of the style. So we start over here with bass, drum, then we've got the second drum track, the percussion track, accompaniment 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. If you're going to mix the style, you need to have the style running. I won't do it now because I'm obviously trying to talk and I don't want the music on at the same time, but I would have that style running and then alter these in, and so that you can hear the changes in real time. That way you will get the style balanced exactly as you want it. You may decide, well, you know, is that really the right guitar? So that's when maybe you just put the S for solo on, and that basically just immediately mutes the rest of the style, and you'll just hear that one part. And it's actually telling you, look, up in the top of the screen, we've got the solo on. As soon as we take that off, that will disappear and we've got the whole style playing again. You can mute sections to see whether the style works better. You know, sometimes you'll get a phrase that is great, but not for the particular piece that you're playing. So on that particular setup, you might want to actually mute it. Any changes you make are temporary in that unless you then save that setting as a songbook entry, the next time you choose that style, it will go back to the factory setting. If you are working on something and you're not sure whether you've got it right or not, it's just so easy to save it as a songbook setting, and saving songbook settings is covered in another video. But if you don't save, like I said, as soon as you come out and you choose another style, your edit has gone. So what I'm trying to say is make sure if you've got something you really like, save it as a songbook entry. Those settings you've made will only apply to that one songbook entry. So this is the condensed mixer. I can still see the tabs along the bottom and I can still see the player information. If you want to delve even further, then just above the grey tab we've talked about is actually a little picture of a mixing desk. Let's press that. Wow. Now we've got our full mixer. And if you see, we've got the introduction of tabs down here and we've got our levels, sound levels indicator here. We still swap between style and keyboard and pads, but now we have far more choice. And I'm going to cover these in separate little videos, but basically when we're on main, we can see now at the top a much clearer image. The image gives us an indication of the type of instrument. We can see the sound. We can actually see the sound number. Again, we'll cover that in another little video, but we can see our panning, we see mute and solo, and we can see the sliders now in much more detail. If we mute a section, then obviously the green light disappears just to confirm that we've actually muted that section. Bring it back on and we now show us that channel being active again. The tabs down the side, EQ, that allows us, and I'll keep this brief on this video, but that allows us to alter basically bass, middle and treble of every sound or every style part. So if you've got a bass sound running in the style and you think, do you know, I want that just a little bit punchier, then you can go into the EQ on the bass, go to the low frequency and boost the low frequency a little bit. And again, it's always done, look for the orange highlight just to show that's the active section, and then adjust accordingly. We have insert effects, we have master effects, and we have the amount of effect that goes to each section. I am going to cover them in a totally separate video. We have bend and tuning. Now, bend is how much and whether it's affected by the pitch bend wheel. Certain sounds work well with pitch bend and there are others. So if you're playing a string orchestra, I don't think you want pitch bend. Now, but you might use the little joystick to do a different function. And sometimes by accident, we move it slightly to the left or slightly to the right and we hear a little bit of pitch bend. We've all done it from time to time. So if you're setting up something, let's just go back to the main sounds. Let's say upper one and upper two here had string sounds in, then you probably want to set the bend to 0. Then if you accidentally catch the pitch bend, doesn't matter, you're not going to have any pitch bend come into effect. The ones below, sharp and flat, they are actually octave shift for each section. Now, done a little bit different on the PA5X. Often on instruments you'll see -1, which will take it down an octave, or -2, down 2 octaves, +1 is up an octave. Here we go in semitones. Now there are 12 semitones in an octave, so if I wanted to take up a 1, down an octave, I'd highlight the shift and then take it down to -12, and that would drop it exactly 1 octave. So we can go actually 3 octaves either way. So it's 12, 24 and 36 are the figures you're looking for. There's very little reason why you would use the ones in between. Then you have a detune. Now, why would you want to detune a sound? Well, let's say you've got, for example, 3 different brass sections mixed together. You know, in a band or in an orchestra, whilst every instrument will strive to achieve to be perfectly in concert pitch, it's not always the case, and it's what makes a band or an orchestra sound like they do is because there are very slight imperfections in the tuning, and you can actually do that here. You can just slightly detune one section. You can make one section a little bit flat. Obviously don't overdo it, it's just a tad, and then you can make another section sharp, and it just gives you that more ensemble sound. And the final tab is the finalizer, and that is really the icing on the cake for a setting, and that's in a recording studio. That's when they master the sound, they put some final little bit of sparkle onto that sound, and again we're going to cover that in a separate video. But that's the difference between the big mixer and the small mixer on PA5X.